Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us today. The Winter Show is a benefit for Eastside House Settlement, and your support here today means that we're actually helping to transform lives for New Yorkers in need. So thank you so much for joining us. We are delighted to have Ellen McGauley with us as moderator. Then we have Jennifer Gracie and Mark D. Sikes. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. So like Helen said, I'm Ellen McGauley. I am the executive editor at Veranda magazine. We are based down in Birmingham, and I am so excited to be back in New York for the week. I'm going to give you a quick preview of what we're here to talk about today. And as Helen mentioned, we did have what was essentially our historian who was called away on DC business. So good news and bad news, we have some really good historians here, but bad news, I'm now the historian. So I'm a writer, and I'm going to try to do this wonderful topic justice, which is today we're going to take you inside the world of America's diplomatic rooms and highlight the legacy building impact these rooms have, not just on American history. I mean, so much happens there, much of we don't get to know. But what we do get to know and revel in and study is how these American beacons of hospitality can impact the American design landscapes of their as it moves through the eras. We're going to look at the choices they've made and why they've made them, and kind of what the next era for Blair House looks like. We're going to be talking about America's Guest House, which you also said is also referred to as America's front door, right? And so that is often with dignitaries and anyone invited by the presidents. This is where they stay at Blair House, and I'm sure you all are somewhat familiar. We're going to take you in a little bit deeper. And our first introduction is Mark D. Sikes. He is the author of 3 books in his beautiful trilogy, which is the name of the trilogy. Designer of projects in the White House and Blair House, most recently this redecoration, this refresh of it that happened just last year, right? Was 2024 project.
November, yep.
Last couple of years.
Very speedy.
It was. That's why I asked. I said, I think it was just last year. Designed all over the world, but as well as private landmarks like Grey Gardens, which grace the cover of Veranda. Mark has been a longtime friend of the magazine, and look for him in our upcoming issue, which is our March issue, where we've got a lot of, we have a designer secret story where he is quoted extensively. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Jennifer Gracie is the creative director and unmatched force behind Gracie, which we all know from their wonderful hand-painted wallpapers. They are a generational purveyor of these exquisite artistic creations that was begun 120 years ago by your great-great-grandfather.
Yes, 126.
126
I know, I look
years
fabulous.
Ago. You do. And your great-great-grandfather is James Gracie, and he started as an antique dealer, right? An antique dealer.
Yes, he was a gilder. He made lamps. We refurbished the Waldorf Astoria, actually, in the 1890s in New York.
Yeah,
so
okay.
He was a jack of all trades.
Jack of all trades. And what unites these panelists here is what we're talking about today with the Blair House, with Mark having just worked in it, and also, this, we'll get into this wonderful wallpaper that has become kind of like this very iconic decorative symbol of Blair House. And so your family has been integral in that, and still is. That relationship continues to evolve, and you've become a historian as well, anecdotally, and we're going to get into some of the fun stories of this. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you.
Blair House was originally known as 6 Presidents Square. In 1818, the Surgeon General under President Monroe bought the land, and his name was Joseph Lovell. So you can see where it is in relation to the White House, and you see the green circle up above, and then you see the White House. Lovell waited 6 years before constructing the home. He didn't get to live in it long. His wife, Margaret, died in childbirth with her 11th child, and he died shortly after. So he built this house, but tragically just didn't get really to live in it very long. But in 1837, the Washington, D.C. newspaper, The Globe, advertised it for sale, and this caught the attention of Francis Preston Blair and his wife, Violet. 3 generations of Blairs lived here. And so shown here is Renwick Gallery. This is the one all the way on the corner, the first building in the U.S. to be built as specifically as an art museum. It's part of the Smithsonian Museum of American Art. You can see Blair House more in the foreground, and the one in the middle is Lee House, which Mr. Blair bought for his daughter, who married Rear Admiral Samuel Phillips Lee, and so hence the name the Lee House. And so we can see that trilogy of buildings there. And so we're looking at here the exterior of it. Today, the President's Guest House exists as 4 structures, and invitations have been extended by every U.S. president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. These were the Blairs that actually fought to have it preserved. I think this is the 3rd generation of Blairs to live there, and they led the efforts to preserve it. I had some information about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was the one who really fought to get, turn it into the historic site, but
Actually,
but not.
it was more his wife. And the reason being that she was a little tired of rude house guests interrupting them. Specifically, Winston Churchill was wandering the halls one night at about 3 o'clock in the morning with his cigar. And he was going to wake up Franklin. And Eleanor interrupted him in the hallway and begged him to wait until breakfast. And it was the very next day that they decided they would buy Blair House. Let's have our
Looks
guests,
like we need a
let's
guest
have our
house,
guests stay a
don't we?
little bit further away.
I love that story. We're just going to take a quick look at some of these, or like this is, pre the decoration era. We're going to take a look at, let's see, we've got here the Lincoln Room, the library, curio room, dining room, another of the dining room, a guest bedroom, Eisenhower sitting room, another guest bedroom, and then, of course, these gorgeous gardens. It was in the 1950s that or the 60s, that it became more of a decorative institution. So what we remember we've heard of Mark Hampton being involved, we've heard of Macmillan being involved. When did all this happen? When did it become something where this era of decoration started? And I'd love to turn that over to you, Jen.
Well, Jacqueline Kennedy, as we know, as Mark knows, was such a stylish woman, such an icon. Due to her education and upbringing, she was exposed to so much beauty and antiques and art, and was so well educated in those things, and decided that she really needed to transform this home. And she told Life magazine that it couldn't simply be a redecoration. It had to be a restoration, and she wanted it to be a scholarly endeavor. So she really wanted each piece to be carefully studied. So when Macmillan purchased these pieces, it really was carefully curated.
And this is, of course, Macmillan, the oldest design.
They're our oldest clients. So Macmillan is celebrating their 100th anniversary.
We just did a story with them as well,
yeah.
and it's really amazing when you look at the decoration
Yes.
history of that.
So we had purchased this wallpaper in 1953. There was a gentleman in the UK who used to travel around to auctions and estates and look for things for my great-grandfather, grandfather, and great-uncle. And he used to write, send cables back and forth about things he had found. And he wrote about a number of things at Ashburnham Place, and wrote about a couple of Coromandel screens, a beautiful lacquer cabinet, and this wallpaper that was applied to the walls on battens, which are basically like big wood frames that would fill an entire wall. So the wallpaper was not applied directly to the wall. It was on these wood frames. So it was easily removed without much damage. We purchased it for £1,000.
From Ashburnham.
Mm-hmm. And
Where was that? That's
in the
Sussex.
UK.
Yeah.
And it was transported on the Queen Mary to New York. And we then restored it, and Macmillan bought it from us in 1964.
So this is the room where it came out of, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when Jackie Kennedy did the entire restoration of Blair House, that wallpaper was purchased. And it's interesting because she apparently was very specific about colors that she did and did not want used. And that paper is so
I'm going to skip ahead for a
so
second, just so
vibrant.
we're looking at the vibrance of that paper. Yeah, and we'll go back to some of those other ones, but that's incredible. She was sort of an advocate for as all of that bright color, right? Yeah.
Apparently with the wallpaper, at least.
Yeah, yeah. What we didn't see here, I'm going to skip back, is who is this?
So that's my grandfather. Yeah, Charles Douglas Gracie. He visited there in 1991. So it was so special to have that photo taken with you and me and Zach in front of that spot, because he had visited, my father had visited. An antique wallpaper never fixed a room exactly. So we had to send artists to do touch-up and little additions. And my father, I think, had visited at one point when it was restored. And my grandfather had been there, but not my son and I. So it was really special.
Well, and one reason we wanted to really pause on this wallpaper, because it has been such a connection from this era of when Jackie Kennedy turned this into this decorative force, and it continues now. And I wanted to, Mark, get your perspective on why this wallpaper has become so associated, and what is so special about this wallpaper that has continued all these years.
Well, I think beyond the story, it's beautiful, and I think it's a captivating room. There are actually 2 drawing rooms that are connected together with this wallpaper, and I also think it's also probably the catalyst for the color palette of the house, which always a paper like this in any project you're working on is. But it's so beautiful, and of course you would never ever want to do anything but enhance it. So it is, I think, and it's so recognizable. I mean, I think if you've all been following the pictures most recently of the most recent inauguration, you saw the new first family getting photographs in this room, and it's so amazing to see this as the backdrop, not for just this administration, but all the administrations before. And I think that's like a really special thing, that all of these people can come together and under one roof and celebrate beauty.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, to that point as well, look at this detail. It's incredible. And again, with the colors. You know, delegations from all over the world have been hosted at Blair House. And so we have Truman and Churchill. This is 1949, I believe. And this is, of course, Jackie and John F. Kennedy in 1962.
Another fun thing that I read, by the way, was when she decided that she wanted to do this whole huge restoration, apparently the operating budget for Blair House was $3,000 a year. And so Mrs. Duke, who I believe was running Blair House at the time, said, we're going to need a little more.
Just a little bit more.
A little more help, yeah.
Okay, we have the bushes with the Queen and Prince Philip, and this is 2007. And we were noticing delegations of all kinds, you know, out there in the gardens. So this kind of brings us up to the present for a moment. And I kind of wanted, you know, we've talked about the importance of this house in American history and American decorative history. Mark, when you were called to do this project, did you approach it with trepidation? What was kind of your feeling going into what you were about to do here?
It's an honor of our lifetime to work on such an amazing historic home for America. But after Jackie Kennedy and the Macmillan years, there was another era, which was under the Reagan administration, and Lucky Roosevelt was the chairman at the time, and that was a 6-year renovation. And at that time, they hired, which I have no idea why, but there were 2 decorators, American decorators, that were hired to work on the new decor of the White House in the 80s. I'm sorry, Blair House in the 80s. It was Mario Boada and Mark Hampton, both American icons. And to me personally, to be able to be even considered to work in the rooms that they had worked in and be a part of that story was an honor. And before me, I think that Tom Pheasant had done some things and Buddy Williams had done some things. So Blair House had a rich history of American designers participating. So, you know, I was thrilled. And we took a lot of effort in going back and studying all the things that you all just talked about and more, and really wanted to not only refresh the house to be more comfortable, be more inviting and be beautiful, but also be super respectful of its history and really ensure that every amazing piece that had been a part of the history had a really wonderful place. So we didn't want to like shake it up too much, but shake it up enough that it felt new.
Such a balance right there.
It's a dance.
Well, isn't it so important that you don't want anyone to walk in and not have it be recognizable, right? Because there's such comfort in familiarity, and it's so beautiful to begin with. And it's so important to keep that consistency with something that's been so iconic for a long time. And
I would imagine that comes up a lot in the choice of designers, because you have that very thin balance there where you want to make sure that it's moving on. It's not a museum. It is, you know, it's a living,
but still.
But it's very recognizable. And so what was the scope of what you were needing to do? Was the public rooms before we get into it?
Well, the scope started out a little smaller in the beginning, but grew a little bit as time went on. I'll just speak to the things we touched. We touched the 2 main Blair drawing rooms, which are the main rooms in the Blair part of the house and the dining room. You spoke of the Lee townhouse, which is right next door with an opening. We did those primary rooms. We also worked on, at the very end, which you did not talk about, near Lafayette Square is the Jackson Place area. So we did all those public rooms, and then we worked on the Foreign Minister's Suite. So I think Blair House is 60,000 square feet. We touched, I think, 20,000 square feet, so it was quite a lot. One thing I'm super proud of, besides the mission of wanting the house to feel inviting and comfortable, I could go on and on about the furniture and how uncomfortable some of the furniture was and trying to find that right balance of keeping those pieces, but also adding in layers that would add comfort, make it more invited. We're very proud of the fact that everything we curated for Blair House was from American brands. I would say 95% of it was completely custom. So we worked with these amazing Schumacher, Gracie, these amazing Patterson Flynn Martin, these amazing American companies, Samuel & Sons, and customized every single thing.
It's amazing in such a short time frame that you were able to do everything custom.
Well, I think it wasn't me. There was all of these vendors and a team of people that all worked collectively. Everyone was so excited about this opportunity to create something completely original and be a part of such an amazing project that everyone gave it their all. So, I mean, it was a short period of time, but everyone pitched in, and it was incredible that it all came together. Caroline, who was the project manager on the project, is sitting here. She's a magician.
Bravo, Caroline.
But nothing went wrong, so I always just kind of think it was all meant to be, because it was like there was just no way that it could have happened so seamlessly, but it did.
We're going to go through some of the photos now and talk about what you did, what you refreshed. And I do want to come back to the idea, and after we look at the photos, talk about hospitality, comfort, and what we can learn from this guest house as we think about decorating for hospitality and comfort and this sense of classic, timeless style. So we have our drawing room right here, right? So Mark, you went in and what did you think of here and do?
Well, so this is the Lee drawing rooms, which we spoke about, the wallpaper, of course. Mario Botta, before myself, worked on this part of the Blair House. And a lot of the pieces of furniture you're looking at right there were already in the room. Mario Botta used more of a palette, I would call it an 80s palette, with mint greens and lemon yellows and corals. So there was it was soft and muted, but there was a lot of patterns in the room. And our first instinct, besides wanting to add some upholstery into the room to make it more comfortable, add more lighting to create some ambiance, but also some functional lights. We wanted to, of course, repurpose all the important furniture, but we kind of stuck to a simpler palette. I call it a candlelight palette. Everything in the room are beautiful creams and vanillas. There's incredible textures, like there's this beautiful cotton velvet, and there's these beautiful silks, but the room does just kind of glisten like candlelight. And that was kind of like our strategy. The rugs remained, and the wallpaper, of course, remained. There was this beautiful rose medallion porcelain that had been a part of the history of Blair House that also remained. But mostly what we did was reupholster existing pieces of furniture, added a lot of upholstery, added a lot of lights, and then we added things that we do all the time in our projects. We added baskets for logs, and we added a lot of textures and layers, plants. How novel is that? But we added plants, which really added life to these rooms. But that was our strategy for this particular space.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, even just, I think, two things for my plants, and also it looks like there's a mix of fabric. There's just these textures, and I think that goes a long way towards comfort.
And I think, too, just back to the singular palette, Blair House is a guest house, so things have to move around a lot depending on what different events. I mean, we always just think people come and spend the night there. Well, that's not the case. There's events where there might be 30 people there, and rooms get kind of rearranged, unfortunately, and moved around. And we were very conscious of the palette, so if things had to be moved around, that they would work in other places and be able to come back together. So I think overall the house feels more unified just because of these more singular stories, and that was one of our strategies as well, is making sure it was flexible and functional. So this is the Jackson Place reception room, and there's a dining room right beside this. In this room, Mark Hampton did. So like I said earlier, Mark Hampton and Mario Botta, they split the house in half, and Mark had done this. And Mark worked with this decorative painter who did this decorative painting in the room, which is basically a decorative painting landscape of all of the iconic historic sites in DC. So there's the White House, there's the Lincoln Memorial, there's everything is kind of shown somehow. So of course we weren't going to touch that, but we did, like the Lee room, kept all the furniture, just reupholstered it. redid all the drapery. One big thing in this particular room is we changed the rugs. We added these antique rugs that are more muted. We really wanted this room to let the decorative painting be the hero. And prior to that, the rugs and I felt like the walls kind of conflicted with one another. But that was our particular strategy here. And you can't see it here, but I think what's really cool is there's a sculpture in Lafayette Park, which is you can see from this particular room, and it's a man on a horse. I think it's Lafayette, right? He's on a horse. And it's also drawn into the paper. So we repositioned this sculpture so that someone could see the mural, the sculpture, and look out at the garden and see the real sculpture all at one time. And it's pretty amazing.
That reminds me of like Jackie's vision of making sure there's a meaning everywhere, and just it's a very kind of American.
You were talking about Jackie, and I think we all know this, but I think it's really important to say she was 30 years old when she took on this endeavor, not just for Blair House, but for the White House. And I was honored to also work with the Bidens on the White House. And you really understand, beside her being a style icon and someone that we all muse about, and like we are inspired by her fashion and her beauty and her elegance, what she was able to accomplish in such a short period of time, catalyzing all these people, building all of these boards and these committees, and all to like preserve America, the best of America and culture, is really phenomenal. And this was before anyone had computers or cell phones. I mean, it came around my brain around how she communicated with all these people. And I was with Mrs. Perot this week, and we were talking a lot about the people that she surrounded herself with. She surrounded herself with Bunny Mellon from Virginia, who really understood lifestyle and understood art and understood how living. And then Jane Reitzman, who was this American who really understood like French antiques. So both these women really inspired her aesthetically, but she put all this together in a very short period of time, not just Blair House, but for the White House. And most of it was done through letter writing. So it's pretty, and then she brought together for the White House, everything had been sold off over the years, the historic pieces from the White House, and she brought them all back together.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty phenomenal, which she did similarly for Blair
It takes
House.
confidence and it takes vision, and that's, I think, what really set her apart. Okay, what are we looking at here?
Well, this is the Blair drawing room. So when you were showing the exterior pictures, this is right when you walk into Blair House, which was the white building next to the brick building. And this is Blair House, we call it Drawing Room 1. One of our first goals when we were doing Blair House, I wanted to paint everything cream. There's beautiful millwork, and we wanted to bring a gilder in. Bill Adair came in and he gilded a lot of the accents, which was very transformative. And for people who've been a part of Blair House for many years, I think it was jarring. The furniture, a lot of the furniture is the same, but we did add these upholstered chairs in that we had custom made to add like comfort. And we call it the Blair lounge chair, but it was mused off of Dita Blair, a chair that she had. And this whole room is, just these beautiful ivories and beautiful ivory fabrics from Schumacher that are completely custom, and beautiful trims from Samuel and Sons. Mario Boada had done this room, and we kept all of the hardware, the rod hardware, and we just came up with a different drapery design. So I would say that, 50% of it was definitely inspired what came before, and then the layers of the fabrics and the colors was probably the other 50% that feel different.
Those curtains are they're hypnotic.
They're
Jen,
so regal.
You know what I'm thinking of when I look at those? You made a point to me earlier about the different kinds of dignitaries and people from all over the world. Some of them, there might be different kinds of relationships that aren't so talk about comfort from that. You were talking about the significance of even just this welcome and feeling comfortable. That was something I hadn't thought of.
Well, I think it's so important. It's not just friends who stay in this home. It's foes as well. And, it's so important, I think, especially when diplomacy is key, right? That someone start off from a place of harmony. Yeah. It goes a long way. You want someone to feel at home. Yeah. It's so important when you have someone in your own home. Tranquility is so vital in a relationship.
Tranquility, tradition,
Absolutely.
And it reminded me of this. I was just looking at those chairs thinking I'd like to sit in those, and you just would feel places that you would feel at ease. Right. And I think there's that undercurrent here.
Absolutely.
That was a really great point. Tell us about this room.
Well, this is the garden room, which is mostly used for entertaining and for events. This mural that's on the wall, Mark Hampton had done as well, and it's the same muralist who worked on Yeah, the Jackson Place mural that I just talked about. It's absolutely beautiful. Really, the only thing we did here was we added the palm trees. We refinished the floor. The gentleman that refinished the floor had simultaneously, while he was doing this, was working on a model for the Oval Office floor. So he and his team refurbished the floors. We recolored it a little bit to make it a little bit more warmer and have it connect with the other spaces. But this is mostly used for entertaining and for events. You can't really see it, but all the china that are on the tables we worked with Tiffany and Company on a custom set of china that would be a part of this refurbishing and to celebrate the 200th anniversary of Blair House. And it's Le Jardin, and they did a custom logo. And the irony in it, not only is the pattern beautiful, but the Le Jardin is very similar to the wallpaper that's in the Lee drawing room with the birds and the butterflies and the flowers. So it feels very connected, but that's what the table is set up in these pictures.
And the china will continue to connect. That's such a I would say a symbol of this moment, to have that kind of addition. That
Absolutely, and talk about fast. We reached out, or I started talking to a lady that works there as a creative about this idea, and literally started talking about 3 months before the anniversary. That it might have been a little bit longer, but literally we were thinking, okay, we're going to have a call to talk about this new china set. We get on this call and 20 people for LVMH are on the call. So when I talk about the enthusiasm of all of these amazing vendors wanting to participate in this is what really made this so special and unique.
it's a very dynamic project. And is this the entry? Is this what kind of corridor?
This is the Blair entry next to the Blair rooms we just spoke about. You can see the gilding in this particular space. So again, this was just painted pretty creams, gilding. The grandfather clock was in another location. We moved it here. The mirror that is over the console was in the old Lee dining room, so we moved it here because the scale was better. So we moved things around, but fundamentally everything was the same. I love that marble pedestal that we found in the attic, and we put it out and put a fern on it. It really is the first thing that greets you, and I think the green, the life, makes such a difference.
I don't want to bring up something that I know nothing about, but I will. So I was reading something about how, formation of, I don't know if it was within the State Department or the foundation, about you had all of these different decorative approaches before there was kind of a governing body. Because when I'm looking at a lot of these rooms, there's no big splashes of wealth or big ornate, come look at us. It's a classic, beautiful decoration. And I thought I had read something about in early days, and this I think was when it came to a lot of the different buildings, you had all of these different, hands in it, and it was just a lot of different points of views. And it seems like there is this very cohesive message of what American decorating is in this one,
I think, again, that goes back to Jackie Kennedy. She made the decision that she wanted this house to go back to classic American style.
Yeah.
So I think she began to set the tone for that, and it probably carried forward, don't you think, Mark, with every sort of refresh from that point?
I think Mario and Mark, when they did, of course, like I said earlier, they're, the best American designers of all time, very classic, very timeless. And I think that they continued that, but it had a little bit of more of an 80s approach to it. So yeah, that was our mission was that as well. But I think that what I would always think about, a lot of these people who come and stay here, whether they're from South Korea or whatever country they're from, they may have never been in an American home. And this is an opportunity for them to experience the best in American hospitality, hopefully the best in American beauty. We took it very seriously about making sure that it was comfortable and it was inviting and they felt like they were at home. I think like Blair House, the White House is well, it's understated. The scale is much smaller than what you would see in England and what you would see in France. So I think Blair House and the White House kind of define American sensibilities and styles. But I think the things that we layered into it that feel more modern are like the baskets and the comfortable upholstery, the lighting. I think all of that was really needed and added a lot of function.
And how about this room here?
Well, this is the Foreign Minister's Suite, which is on the 3rd level. And after the principal, this is probably where the next, if a delegation comes, the principal stays in the principal suite. And I guess the second in command would stay in the Foreign Minister's Suite. I think every single person that I talk to that comes to Blair House, they all say this is their favorite room now, which is so amazingly fascinating. But this wallpaper was a pattern that Schumacher had in their line, and we custom colored it. And then we have a decorative painter that works with us hand in hand on all of our projects named Joseph Stieford. And he worked on the decorative painting, the Chippendale design below the chair rail. So it feels completely original. A lot of the antiques in the room we kind of found from other places in the house and kind of mixed them, but the upholstery, of course, is new, and the side tables are new. This is Blair Drawing Room 2. So this is connected. The opening to this room is the room that we talked about, we saw earlier where the gentleman was standing in the room. This is also the coromandel screen that you all saw in the earlier images that has now been separated and flanking the fireplace. And in this room, of course, the Chippendale settee was there. We recovered it. The needlepoint chairs had been a part of the Jackie era time. And again, with another pair of the upholstered chairs. It's just a very similar, obviously it's the very same palette as the room right next to it. This is my favorite room in
Is
the
it?
whole house. Yes.
That was going to be a question of mine. So
It really is. Those two rooms are.
how about this one?
This is the Eisenhower room that's upstairs off of the Presidential Library. It had been yellow before, so that was our thought was how do we keep it familiar, and the yellow was what made it familiar, but we did add this beautiful floral fabric from Schumacher that is on the chair and on the pillows. And we really felt like this room could hold a floral pattern because there wasn't a lot going on decoratively. But it's a really, really beautiful room. And most of the desk was Truman's. And when we were installing the house, we would open up these boxes and unwrap papers, all these wonderful things that had been in his office, and put in the cabinet. So it's really incredible to not only decorate these rooms, but to touch and feel these things that had been such a part of all the decision making in America.
It probably makes it feel very alive,
Well, you can't see it, but there's a porcelain cow that's that's on the desk, which is really cool. This is just another view of the Blair Drawing Room, another vantage point, looking straight on at the coromandel screens. The desk that's sitting behind the settee, we actually curated that and found that's an antique. And that's where the guest book for Blair House stays. So when people come and visit, that's the first place they stop, and they write in the guest book. And I think that there are 13 guest books from over the years. This one, I think, goes back to the Obama administration, but that's the purpose of that space.
And now we get to some powder room. This is a powder room, right?
This is the ladies' bathroom, yes.
Okay. Jen, can you tell us a bit about this? This was a custom paper?
It was. Mark contacted us about this one. It had a tiny little fretwork background, and Mark wanted a nod to DC with the little blossoms, like cherry blossoms for Washington in springtime. So we did this lovely metallic pink background for the ladies' room, and it was a completely custom pattern for this room, which we love to do. Makes our job more fun if we don't do something that we do every day. So it was cherry blossoms throughout the room.
Mark, that turned out really, really nicely.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And that Chippendale pattern that Jen was mentioning, that's the backdrop, was what inspired the Chippendale that we used throughout the entire house. So if you go, look, when I talk about the Foreign Minister's Suite, the fretwork, the Chippendale fretwork that Joseph did underneath the chair rail was inspired by this, and there's a couple other areas. So we're hoping that this Chippendale pattern becomes an iconic thing for our era. Of Blair House.
Kind of a hallmark of it. Where is this?
This is the men's restroom that's directly across from the from the women's bathroom, and obviously very similar patterns. This one's blue, and obviously the ladies was pink.
This also had the fretwork pattern in the background, but there were no flowers for the men's room, just leaves and trees. I love pattern on pattern, but it's very subtle. Yeah, very, very subtle.
Now, we're probably getting close to the time here. I wanted to kind of think about the legacy and lessons of Blair House and what we can learn from when it comes to comfort and hospitality, and how we can design for a moment while also really respecting tradition. And so, especially after working on this project, and Jen, you having your family's history in this project, what can we learn about hospitality from Blair House when it comes to decorating?
Well, I mean, I spoke a little bit about some of the things that we thought about. We wanted each room to be comfortable, and we wanted to make sure there's places that people could sit that would be comfortable, which was somewhat of a novel idea. There was not a lot of upholstery in Blair House. We also made sure that everything was made lightweight. So we worked with Bill Bloom, and you wouldn't believe how lightweight those upholstered chairs are. You could literally just push them because things get moved around a lot. I think lighting played a key part. There had not been a really great lighting plan. There's not a lot of function. There's no functional lights in the house, obviously, because it's old. So everything is decorative lighting, but there are very few lamps, very few floor lights. And I think all of that really adds to enjoying the rooms. And I spoke a little bit about the textures of the baskets and the plants, but all of that. But there was one thing that was one of my strategies from the very beginning, and I think because each of the rooms had like somewhat of a different theme, and we wanted to create continuity. One of our ideas was, how do we create continuity? And we wanted to take things that we loved, like a singular, beautiful floor lamp, and use it, repeat it. And there are these beautiful hurricanes, which you did not see, that we worked with Frederick Victoria on. There are these beautiful glass hurricanes that we sprinkled throughout the whole house, but you can't have candlelight in Blair House, so we had them electrified, so they're like a light. But they're, there's something familiar as you walk through the house, you start seeing these things that are repeated. I think back to icons that I love, like Givenchy and Bunny Mellon, if you will, and all of their residences and the way they lived, there was repetition. So repetition was a big part of what we wanted to do. Christopher Spitzmiller was amazing and worked with us on these amazing custom lamp profiles that you see sprinkled throughout the house over and over, and they're just so classic and timeless. And I think there is something about it that is beautiful, but I also think it creates this harmony. And I think it also feels more modern. That's a way of making a house feel more of today versus so like historic and older.
Yeah, continuity is a great point when I think about the takeaway. And Jen, just stop me if you'd rather not. But you were talking about a dinner, because I'm thinking you did make people, like Blair House does make people feel at home, and there's anecdotes that we hear where people felt very much at home, enough to order pizzas or, yeah. Do you have?
Well, that's a story that Mark heard, as well as Mrs. Perot. Hillary Clinton told a story about when she and Bill Clinton were in the White House, and Boris Yeltsin was staying at Blair House. And they got a call from the Secret Service in the middle of the night. And apparently Boris Yeltsin had ordered a pizza and was out in the middle of the street. And the Secret Service said, "We don't know what to do. We can't get him inside. He's waiting for a pizza."
He was in America. Yeah.
That's what you do.
You
when
felt
you're here.
very
You
much
felt
at
very
home.
much at home.
Yeah. So I would say mission accomplished, Jackie, and everyone after that, So I think I'd like to open it up to questions at this point. Does anybody have any questions for Jen or Mark? If it's the history, I'll just make it up as I go along. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Isabel, big fan. The rooms are very beautiful. They're also very feminine. How do you create a balance so that there's a bit of masculinity in them?
Masculinity and feminine, how does he create a balance?
Well, I think there's a lot of foundational things in the house that were more feminine. The chinoiserie wallpaper, of course, and some of the rugs were pastel. But I do feel like in many ways we neutralized the house a little bit. There are a lot of blues and a lot of greens and a lot of neutrals, which, I think both women like, men like. I think it's a little bit more universal.
The portraits as well.
The portraits are very dark. They add a foundation, all the dark. But I think it was more feminine actually before in the Mario Botta, Mark Hampton era, and I think we, neutralized it a little bit. And I think when I think about American colors, of course, you think about blue and you think about white. So we were also very focused on creating a palette that felt very American, but also making sure it felt very balanced.
Yeah, that's a great question. I hadn't thought of that. Yes.
This question is more White House than Blair House, but I'm very curious to know if you could elaborate. The White House that Jackie Kennedy found when she moved in, quite horrified from plastic flowers to really bad copies of furniture, and then finding in the basement just treasures that were untouched for years. Can you tell us a bit about?
To the best of my ability, I could tell you what I do know. I do know that she very immediately saw that it was a big opportunity to not only just refurbish the White House in a way that brought it back to its best that it can be, and like getting all the treasures that had been there before or downstairs and cataloging all of it. She also set up all these organizations, the White House Historical Association, all these different committees that would make sure she not only did it for that time, she also set it up that it would be sustainable, which I think is really, the thought that goes into that is incredible. And she had worked with Sister Parrish, and then, there was a big French influence with Baudouin and Janson that came in and helped as well. But again, she did that in a very short period of time. It's not talked about a lot, and I might have my facts wrong, but Patricia Nixon, I believe, was the first lady who almost finished the work. So Jackie started the work curating or finding all of these things all across the world in America that had been sold and getting them back, writing personal letters. It was not all accomplished and done, but I believe Patricia Nixon was the first lady who finalized all of that. So the work went on, and I don't think she's ever celebrated for finishing it. And that's kind of the story there.
Great point. Good question. Thank you. Back here. Yes.
I guess it's the House and also the White House. When it comes to selecting artworks to coordinate the spaces, we talk about this classical style, American style, but we have this more modern art that's getting added. Is there ever an interest to include more modern furniture as well, just like prairie style, this Frank Lloyd Wright-esque?
I can't really speak to the White House as much, but Blair House, most all the art in Blair House is pretty much what had been there before. That's historic portraits of the family and portraits of presidents and art that had been curated through the State Department. So there's very little. There's no modern art. The modern sensibilities that were layered into Blair House, I think, are the more of these comfortable things that I spoke about earlier. We are, embarking on a new endeavor, which will be called Trowbridge House, which is going to be connected to Blair House. It'll be the fifth, I might get my numbers wrong, the fifth townhouse to be added, and it will be the house for former presidents to stay. So we're hoping that maybe in this new townhouse, we can incorporate some more modern art into the mix. But we're going to be all working on that soon. But that will be a place we can maybe reimagine completely. But most of Blair House primarily is historic pieces of art.
What state is that house in right now? Is it going to be a complete restoration?
It's a townhouse that's right next to the Jackson Place townhouse, and there'll be an opening from that townhouse into Trowbridge. It is a townhouse that exists. I believe it's a part of the White House Historical Association. Has not been used for anything other than maybe storage or maybe offices. So it's been a part of the organization, and this is just a new initiative that's being worked on right now. So there's not an exact timing of it. We were hoping that it would be opened and launched to celebrate America's 250th anniversary, which is in just 2 years. It's hard to imagine.
That's exciting. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for such an inspiring panel. My name is Editor of Veranda. I'm a decorator on the Netflix series The Diplomat, season 3, which is currently shooting in New York. So we've been inspired by many of these rooms and by some of your work, Mark. So thank you very much. And we also had the good fortune that all our vendors were so enthusiastic as well to work on our sets. And we had very close collaboration with Gracie Wallpaper.
We were excited to work with you.
It's a good show.
And what a wonderful, that is a way to connect America and the world to Blair House and to American design, which, people today don't necessarily study as much as they used to or be informed historically. But your show is hopefully giving a nod to these amazing historic residences.
It is.
It's amazing. And Gracie, which is more important.
Yes.
Thank you for this. It's all really exciting. Where do the chandeliers come from?
The chandeliers were all there when I came, so I think they've been there for probably 100 years. So we didn't change any of the lights. They've come from all different places, but most of the chandeliers have been in the particular rooms, I think from, for sure, the mid 1900s.
Yeah, beautiful.
They are. They're spectacular.
Anything else before we wrap? Yes, right here.
Thank you. I have a question about it maybe not specific to here, but when you're working on an older home and you're looking at the many layers of wallpaper that have been there and you want to restore it historically in a factual way, how do you determine which layer of wallpaper you're going for?
Is this for me?
It was not for me. I don't know.
Well, in our case, we've probably bought close to 1,000 antique wallpapers over our history. And the reason an antique wallpaper like the beautiful one in Blair House can still exist is because of the way it was installed in the first place, either like the one here, where it was installed on battens, or because it was installed over a fabric so that it could be sort of carefully peeled from the wall.
Is that why they did it, or is that just how they did it?
It's why, because it was really treasure from the beginning. Yeah. It's really
It was
more
appreciated
art
even
than
back.
wallpaper.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. These were created at a time when people could not jump on a plane and travel halfway around the world. This was truly something one of a kind and very precious that you were bringing from halfway around the world. And it was something that was very rare and coveted. So people knew that if they were moving, they wanted to be able to take it with them. So that is why antique wallpapers are able to be preserved and moved, and why you see them for sale at auction, and why they still exist. But there are fewer and fewer in existence every year. You know, there are floods and things happen. People don't understand the value of them, don't like them, tear them down. I don't like to hear the stories.
And then there's also, you know, as we talk about the impact moving forward, is that this wallpaper was recreated recently or reproduced for a Kips Bay show house,
Yes,
right? And
we
it just
did.
shows how relevant it is going forward, and what was done back then is still living. And this wasn't that long. This was what, last year? No.
Yes.
Was it last year?
Last year.
All great questions. And thank you all so much for coming. And thank you to our panelists, our wonderful panelists. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming.